So how would you grade Venezuela's Copa America?
Venezuela Copa America. If I had to put a letter grade to it, man, I'd say this is one of the hardest teams to grade.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
Would I be unfair to hit them with a C+?
Dude, I hit him with a B-. No.
I think it's right there. It's right there. It's
Tell us why.
why. The why is going to be so hard. Because it's middling. It's just above average. Like, you have to give them credit for what they've done, right? Like, you want to take Venezuela into context. Since 1967 up until 2007, they won one game. One game.
Horrendous.
It's horrendous. Immediately after that, 2007 to now, that's 7 Copa Americas. They have not made the quarterfinals twice. That's a pretty solid record.
Yeah.
So it looks to be business as usual, but I would counter-argue any sort of failures that you could say there to bring them lower than a C+, to bring them to average C, C-, by saying that context matters here and that they played a good game. They played good games.
Yeah.
This is a competitive Venezuela with lots of potential, and the aggregate age on this team is 29.6, I think.
That's pretty old.
It's pretty old, but there's a lot of young talent there. The entire midfield is under 30. They've got at least another Copa America, especially if they bring in some more players.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the I think we were talking to a chauffeur that was driving us to the airport. Shout out to our guy. He was telling us that there is talent in Venezuela, so I think it's just a matter of can the infrastructure support bringing these players up. We don't have to get into that now. My point is, I have hope for Venezuela. There is hope here, and they left me very impressed after this Copa America. So for that, I got to give it above then. C, C+, maybe B-. Yeah.
Yeah, I think two things that work against Venezuela and giving them an A. I mean, I think an A is an asinine grade. I don't think you can do that. One, I feel like a lot of people had picked these guys as the dark horse for the Copa America. We said it before in our preview. There was a lot of hype, strange hype even, around Venezuela. Some of it was justified. Some of it I thought was a little overboard. But you take that and you're like, okay, are you a dark horse if you lose to Canada? And that's the other thing. You lost to Canada. And the Canadians will say they outplayed you. Now, that might be a little debatable, but you still lost to a Copa America debutante from CONCACAF with a manager who had had 5 games with the team. And this is a Venezuelan side under Batista that's very well drilled. To me, to get anything higher than a B-, especially after taking 9 from the group, the only team that put an ounce of respect on Group B, and then to lose to Canada, I think it really deflated the balloon, to go back to what we were saying in the Canada segment.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, this is a Canada side that, like you said, took 9. Canada side. This is a Venezuela side that took 9 points from the group, and overall in the competition, I would say this is a plus. I think they scored 7 goals and conceded 2
In the entire tournament?
in the entire tournament.
Yeah. 1 to Canada, 1 to Ecuador. Yeah.
And this is a good Canada side. You have to take that into account. But they are a CONCACAF team. They are a debutante. So I don't know. There's a lot of good and a pretty significant, not a lot of bad, but I would say a significant amount of bad that is mixed into this letter grade here. There's some pretty, I don't want to say glaring flaws, but they're flaws that have to be taken into account. And when I was talking about hope earlier, I think that the major takeaway from this Venezuela side is that their legacy here in regards to this team is decided by what they do next, right? Because this is I would say it's even a fair ending to their campaign to lose to a dark horse Canada that nobody saw coming.
Yeah.
And it's fair. It's fair where they ended. That being said, you have to hope for more. You have to hope for more regarding, the hype that they brought into the tournament, their play style, and the fact that they are so well drilled. You have to want more from that.
Yeah.
9 points from the group, and you're losing to Canada. It's weird how the dialogue shift, but that is definitely a negative. Even though, we just got done hyping Canada up, which they should. Give them their flowers. They earned this. But
Right.
when you're looking at a team like this Venezuela, are you part of the big boys?
No. They're absolutely not. You cannot be part of the big boys in the Americas or CONMEBOL if you cannot beat Canada. You simply cannot. I mean, we're just being. This is not a charity here.
But my counter argument to that is, where does Uruguay stack up if they have to beat Canada on penalties?
I understand what you're saying, but if you even zoom out past the Copa America and you look at the qualifiers, I mean, you can't say that Uruguay haven't been the best team.
Yeah.
So that's my argument to that. Is like, yes, Uruguay also did struggle. And Uruguay were disappointing. In my book, they were disappointing. But you look at the qualifiers and you say, okay, these guys are still legit. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
With Venezuela, it was a very intense quarterfinals matchup because it was like the two dark horses running into each other. And legacies are on the line in games like that. Okay, who wants to win and be the one who has a successful tournament? If Canada lose that game, how much are we talking about Jesse Marsh? We're talking about, wow, Batista might be next up. Oh my God, I can't believe Rondon's still doing it. Shout out to Rondon, had a great tournament. The dialogue is completely different and it's decided by a penalty shootout because Crepeau's a beast. Football's a game of fine margins, man.
Fine margins.
One more penalty.
Massive results.
100%. One more penalty goes the other way, and Venezuela, they become the biggest winners possibly. And they go on to maybe surprise Argentina or play Uruguay in that third place game, and everybody's like, oh my God, the hype is justified. Instead, it went to Canada's way, and credit to them. We should talk very quickly about something that surprised us about this Venezuela side, either in a good way or a bad way. I'm going to go with John Aramburu, the fullback. I think he's 21, from Sociedad. Again, we were talking to the Uber driver. I don't know where this man came from. I don't know how common Aramburu is in Venezuela as a last name. I mean, it sounds dope.
It's Basque, right?
I thought it was Basque. Well, he plays for a Basque club, but maybe it's not. The point is, the dude's a stud. I think in defensive actions, he was like leading the team in every single category, and he missed a game. I don't know why he didn't play in the first game. But his first game of the tournament was against Mexico, where he was man of the match. So I think Venezuela got a good one there. So I think from a player personnel, that's a guy who surprised me a lot. I also did not see them beating Jamaica 3-0. I didn't think Venezuela could score 3 goals in a game. But that's what happened. You got anything that surprised you, good or bad?
Yeah, I think my surprise is pretty run-of-the-mill. It's the loss to Canada. I did not expect that coming.
Yeah.
I did not see that. The Jamaica scoreline, I think you have to say that Venezuela showed up on the day ready to prove themselves and assert themselves. And, I mean, if you're looking at a game of fine margins like footy, and you say that, okay, well, context matters, the intangibles matter, and they showed up on that day ready to dominate, you have to almost wish, if you're Venezuelan, that they had saved that day, they had saved that preparation for the Canada game. I don't know what it was in that mentality, and I'm not saying that Canada and Jamaica are the same, right? Obviously, there's levels to this, and Jamaica falls on the lesser of that scale, unfortunately for the Jamaicans. But, dude, you have to say that you want Venezuela to reserve a little bit of that energy and to conserve themselves for the Canada game, because that could have been a different result, and then would have been a completely different dialogue, right? If they showed up with that killer's instinct against Canada, we could be having a completely different podcast today.
Correct.
And, I mean, you just have to say that's a little unfortunate for the Venezuelans. But, yeah, it's kind of a cop-out, but that's my surprise. I was genuinely pretty shocked that they weren't up to snuff there. But maybe that's credit to Canada at the end of the day.
Do you think Venezuela were good and are good, or was Group B just terrible?
I think both can be true. And that's another cop-out answer, but you know me, I love to take the middle road. Like, I think that they faced very little competition in their group. They are one of the bright spots there, right? And they left with their 9 points. You have to give them credit for that. They did well. But in addition to that, the other teams around them didn't prepare them significantly for the ultimate matchup against Canada, and I don't think they were expecting Canada to be that good on the day. No. And, I mean, the result is what it is, and it stands as it stands.
I'm going to be the bad guy, and I'm going to say it's more the group. I think it is more the group. And I think it is more circumstance as well.
Okay.
I think Ecuador, despite being more talented than Venezuela, have never looked like it since Batista took over, which is a crime. But I think that's more of an internal problem with Ecuador than Venezuela. I think if Batista was the manager of Ecuador instead of Venezuela, I think Ecuador make it out of the group. But instead you have a guy who's now gone, Felix Sanchez-Bas, who's trying to play a style of football that just simply doesn't fit the players that he had. So you had a disastrous approach to the tournament from Ecuador, and Ener Valencia gets a red in the 12th minute or something. So you do beat Ecuador 2-1. It was a comeback win because Ecuador scored first. Congratulations. Venezuela, I'm not saying they don't deserve credit for that, but that was an Ecuador, I think it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I have to be honest about that. I think Tim Weah was a self-inflicted gunshot wound, against Panama as well.
These things have to be taken into account.
Correct. You have to call it out and say this is what happened, while simultaneously said, well, Venezuela did go on to win the game, so they deserve credit for that. If they had drawn Ecuador despite being a man up for 80 minutes, that's a massive L, and we're clowning Venezuela.
Because we're about to clown Uruguay for that. Don't get it twisted.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, wait till we get to Colombia and I get to go off on Daniel Munoz. But I think that's true. You look at the Mexico game, Mexico miss a penalty because Oberlin Pineda says, let me shoot the worst pen in the history of the Copa. And if that doesn't happen, then the game might be a draw. And honestly, it's a stupid penalty that Quiñones fouls on Aramburu, ironically, who I think is maybe Rondon's the player of the tournament for Venezuela, but I think Eduard Bello's up there. Sotelo, disappointing. We'll get to him in a second. And then you have Jamaica, who were just trash. It ends up being Halgrimsson's final game in charge. Venezuela are good, and Jamaica are not. Venezuela should not be dog-walking Jamaica 3-0 like that. I just think Jamaica is an absolute cesspool. And then you get to Canada, and again, if they win that game, then who cares about the context in the group stage? But you didn't. You lost, and you got outplayed for portions of the game. Maybe even the majority of the game. So that's where I'm like, Venezuela, like, congratulations, but I'm not anointing you as like one of the big winners from the Copa. No.
No, you can't.
You cannot. You cannot.
You've got to look to the actual results, the end results, right? And then zoom out and see the tournament overall, what is indicative of what could have signified their loss against Canada. What are the catalysts to that? And yeah, I think, even when I was discussing, what is it, the group, or was Venezuela good? I kind of went the middle path, but the more I talked about it, I think I even said that I'm convincing myself that yeah, the group was not enough to keep them competitive. It was not enough.
Yeah, and I think Venezuela's weaknesses were on display throughout the entire tournament, which is a lack of finishing. I mean, if Rondon's not putting it away, you might get one from Bello. You might get one from Cadiz, which you did. But eventually, the goals dried up against Canada.
100%. And I would say the same thing if Argentina doesn't pull through and advance against Ecuador.
Correct.
100. You say the same thing about Argentina's group. They didn't prepare them adequately.
Can I say that Sotelo was the most disappointing player for Venezuela?
You can expand on that.
I think even both us as a channel, but I'll even go to the CONMEBOL public at large. I mean, this is a guy who's a very respected player. He's playing in the Brazilian League. He's a guy who's had some pretty insane highlights recently with La Sele. And he shows up and does F all. I mean, F all.
Quiet.
He got pocketed by Preciado. How you going to get pocketed and you up a man? How is that possible? I mean, Preciado's a dog, but how are you going to get pocketed with that amount of space?
It doesn't make sense.
Didn't do anything against Mexico. Nothing against Mexico. You're being marked by Jorge Sanchez, dude. You know how many times Pulisic has embarrassed that man? And you can't do anything?
You can make a scrapbook.
You can make a scrapbook. We can make a pop-up book. I mean, we can do both. What do you want to do? What color pastels you want to use? Like, I was really disappointed with how he was because, again, Rondon completely outshowed him. You could say Machis was even better. And when you're Venezuela and you don't have the depth up front, bro, we saw it with Canada as well. You need the big guys to show up. If Jonathan David ain't showing up, Kyle Larin, Tajon Buchanan go show, well, you're not going to score a lot of goals, bro. And you're not going to win those close games. Same thing with Sotelo. It's like they needed you, and he didn't do enough.
Where were you?
Where were you?
Where was Gondor when the Westfold fell?
He was in Preciado's pocket. That's it. Like, I know I sound like I'm hating, but that's because I had expectations for this man.
There were expectations that were not met, and I think that's fair. That's valid, and you have to take that into account. Yeah.
Any final thoughts on Venezuela?
I think I said it earlier. Venezuela's legacy is not contingent upon this Copa America because it left a lot to be desired, but there were also really good spots. That hinges on what comes next. What comes next? What do they do in World Cup qualifying? How do they compete against bigger teams? What are the results? Can they score goals? Are they able to fix the issues that they have in front of them? Where is Sotelo? Does he show up now? Those are the questions. I still think that they qualify. I think I would be shocked if they don't. And I think that is the number one, desire and objective of the Venezuela national team and the federation, the country overall. I think that's still very feasible. You just have to hope that this doesn't break anything, this doesn't change anything outside of maybe some minor tweaks and improvements to both steady the ship and help it carry on for the longer voyage ahead, because you got a long 2 years ahead of you.
Yeah, I'll end the vid by saying the World Cup is definitely the large goal here for Venezuela. I do think they will qualify. I still think this team is solid, but I think they have a hard cap of what they can do, right? Like a coach can amplify your strengths and weaknesses, and I think Batista's doing that. But at the end of the day, you're still relying on a 34-year-old striker to score the goals for you. And I think the biggest question for this team is, what are you going to do post-Rondon? Because he's 34 years old. He's by far your most dangerous attacker, your most consistent attacker. I don't think that's going to matter too much for the Mundial because we're like 18 months away. Like he just won a goddamn CONCACAF Champions Cup with Pachuca. Dude's a freak. Like he's going to be there for 2026, but who's next up? And I don't know enough about Venezuelan football to say. So anybody in the comments, if you know who the successor.
Venezolanos, now's your time. Now's your time. Give us that context. Give us ideas, players to watch. We need something. We're looking for any excuse to talk these guys up.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna praise more than what I've already done in the past because I honestly don't think it's justified. But you guys let us know in the comments how you feel about Venezuela's Copa America campaign.